Hey everyone, welcome back. Glad to have you here. Today, I've got another eye-opening story to share, so let's jump right in. My name's Thomas, and this is the story of how I learned the hard way that love doesn't always mean appreciation. Sometimes, the person you give your heart to will take you for granted, until it's too late. Lucy and I met in our early 20s. Back then, we were inseparable, the kind of couple people would look at and say, yeah, those two are meant to be together. Ours was the kind of love that felt effortless. Late-night drives, deep conversations, just the two of us wrapped up in our own little world. Getting married felt like the natural next step, like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. We had big dreams, traveling, building a life together, maybe even starting a family someday. And for a while, things were good. Really good. But life has a way of creeping in, doesn't it? I was grinding, pouring everything I had into building my business from scratch. Long hours, sacrifices, but no matter how packed my schedule got, Lucy was always my priority. I made time for her, planned little surprises, set up date nights, even if it was just sitting together and talking after a long day. I wanted her to know she mattered. And in the beginning, she did. She was proud of me, always cheering me on, always supportive. But then, little by little, something changed. At first, it was subtle complaints that she needed more time for herself, that she wanted to focus on her life. And honestly, I understood. Everyone needs space to grow. So, I encouraged it. But soon, it wasn't about self-care or personal growth. It became something else entirely. She started talking about putting herself first, not in a healthy way, but in a way that meant doing whatever she wanted, without any concern for how it affected our marriage. She stopped trying. Our plans? They didn't seem to matter to her anymore. She barely even asked how my day went. Yet, somehow, she still expected me to treat her like the center of my world. It was like she wanted all the benefits of being married, without actually being a wife. At first, I convinced myself this was just a rough patch. Every marriage has its ups and downs, right? So I did what any good husband would do. I tried harder. I avoided fights whenever I could. If something upset me, I'd bring it up calmly. But if it led to an argument, I'd bite my tongue, swallow my frustration, and let it go. I went out of my way to make her happy, bought her little gifts, things I knew she liked. Flowers. Perfume. That expensive handbag she had been eyeing for months. Anything to remind her that I cared, that I was still here. But it didn't matter. Nothing changed. She'd say thanks sometimes, but it was hollow. No real excitement, no appreciation. Just a half-hearted smile before she went back to scrolling on her phone. Then came the talk. I need space. I need to find myself. At first, I didn't question it. I figured maybe she was just going through something, trying to figure things out. So, I gave her room. Stopped pulling her close. Let her go out as much as she wanted. But the more space she got, the worse things became. It was like she'd rewritten our story in her head, casting herself as the main character and me as nothing more than a background prop. Someone to be there, to do things for her, but not someone to actually love. She started acting like she was settling for me, like she could have done better, like I was the one who wasn't enough. And I won't lie, that messed me up. When you love someone who treats you like an afterthought, you start doubting yourself. You start wondering if maybe they're right. Maybe you really aren't good enough. Maybe you're the problem. I spent countless nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what changed. What did I do wrong? When did I stop being enough for her? But deep down, I already knew the truth. No matter how much I loved her, I couldn't fix what she didn't want to fix. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend everything was fine. Then came the night that changed everything. I had been waiting up for hours, watching the clock, listening to the distant hum of cars outside. It wasn't the first time Lucy had come home late, but something about this night felt different. When I finally heard the door creak open, I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. I didn't want to start a fight, but I had a feeling, deep in my gut, that things were about to take a turn I couldn't ignore. I was too drained to get into another argument. She walked in, unsteady on her feet, and before I even turned to look at her, the sharp scent of alcohol hit me. She barely acknowledged my presence. Without a word, she tossed her bag onto the couch, kicked off her shoes, and acted like nothing was wrong. I swallowed my frustration, keeping my voice steady as I finally asked, "Lucy, do you even realize what you're doing? This wasn't just about coming home late. It was about something deeper." She was pushing me away, and I wasn't sure she even cared. I had been patient, I had tried, but she wasn't acting like a wife anymore. She rolled her eyes, like I had just said the dumbest thing she'd ever heard. Then, with a lazy smirk, she let out a laugh. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You actually think I need you? You think you're that special?" She tilted her head, amusement flashing in her eyes. "Plenty of men would line up to be with me. If you leave, I'll replace you by tomorrow." I felt my chest tighten, but I refused to let it show. And she wasn't finished. Straightening up, she crossed her arms, her voice dripping with defiance. "I'm done living by your rules. I'm done living by anyone's rules. This is my life, Thomas, and no one, not you, not society, gets to tell me how to live it." Then she smirked, like she was proud of what she was saying. "I'm in my baby girl, Arinelle. Either deal with it or don't." And that was it. That was the moment I knew. I had lost her. Or maybe, just maybe, she had lost me. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't try to convince her to see reason. What was the point? She had already decided who she wanted to be, and that woman wasn't the one I had married. So, I made my choice. I let her have the life she wanted. And I walked away. The next morning, I searched for the best divorce lawyer in town and made the call. I wasn't interested in dragging things out. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to make her life difficult. I just wanted a clean break. Since we had no kids and I wasn't about to fight over furniture or shared bank accounts, the process moved fast. I didn't care about what was fair or unfair. I just wanted out. I didn't even show up for the final meeting. My lawyer handled everything. And when the papers were signed, I did exactly what I promised myself I would do. I disappeared. No calls. No texts. No long, emotional messages. I was just gone. At first, she didn't seem to care. If anything, she looked relieved, convinced that this was her fresh start, her chance to finally be free. I caught glimpses of it on social media. Photos of her out with friends, drinks in hand, captions about new beginnings and knowing your worth. She was living it up like she had won something. And for a while, it really seemed like she had moved on without a second thought. She jumped back into the dating scene almost immediately, and there was no shortage of men eager to give her attention. But there was a problem. She wasn't the prize she thought she was. Oh, she got attention, just not the kind she expected. The men chasing after her weren't looking for commitment. They wanted fun, not a future. And the ones who actually did want something serious? They weren't the type of men she wanted. I wasn't there to see it firsthand, but I heard things. She went through relationships like they were disposable, bouncing from one guy to the next, never finding anything that lasted. One by one, they all walked away. The constant stream of attention she had once thrived on started feeling hollow, meaningless. And slowly, the confidence she had flaunted for so long, it started to crack. For the first time, she was alone, not by choice, not for self-discovery, but because she had pushed away the only person who had ever actually loved her. How do I know? Well, we still had mutual friends. People still talked. And as for me, I wasn't looking back. After the divorce, I had a choice. I could have jumped into another relationship just to fill the void. I could have drowned myself in distractions, meaningless flings, temporary highs. But that wasn't me. That wasn't what I wanted. I had spent too long in a marriage where I felt invisible, where I was unseen. No, it was time to choose me. So, I did. I poured myself into my business, using it as a way to rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I poured everything into my business, pushing it further, strengthening its foundation, and expanding it beyond what I ever thought possible. It stopped being just a job and became something more, a reminder that I had purpose, that I was capable, and that my worth was never tied to being someone's husband. Over time, my efforts paid off. My business thrived in ways I hadn't imagined, and with each milestone, I felt more in control of my life than I had in years. At the same time, I made my own well-being a priority. I focused on my health physically, mentally, and emotionally. Hitting the gym wasn't just about fitness. It was about regaining my strength, rebuilding myself from the inside out. I paid attention to what I ate, improved my sleep, and started taking care of myself in ways I had neglected for far too long. Along the way, I accepted a hard truth. Some people will never appreciate what they have, no matter how much you give. And I refused to let loneliness fool me into running back to something broken or into seeking temporary connections just to fill the emptiness. Instead, I learned to be alone without feeling lonely. I became comfortable in my own company, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. And as I focused on myself, I began to thrive. That, more than anything, was my greatest victory. Years passed before I saw Lucy again. It happened on an ordinary day, while I was out running errands, picking up a few things from a department store. As I turned a corner, I spotted her standing just a few feet away. She held a shopping bag, her posture stiff as her eyes locked onto me, like she was seeing a ghost. For a moment, she looked unfamiliar. She still had the same polished appearance, but there was something different, something beneath the surface that hadn't been there before. Her gaze moved over me, taking in the changes, as if she was trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the one she used to know. She spoke first, her voice uncertain, hesitant. There was a nervous laugh, a quick adjustment of her hair, and an attempt to sound casual. Her eyes lingered a little longer, scanning for a reaction. I nodded politely and responded with a calm, measured tone. Nothing too revealing, just enough to acknowledge the moment without letting it carry weight. She tried to keep the conversation going, asking about life, about how things had been. I answered casually, giving only surface-level responses, keeping it light and distant. There was no coldness, but there was nothing for her to hold on to either. She hesitated before suggesting that we catch up sometime. I acknowledged the suggestion with a nonchalant response, knowing full well that the past was exactly where it belonged. That door had closed long ago. A few days later, she reached out. It started with a simple message, the kind that seemed effortless and casual, as if testing the waters. A short note about how it was nice to run into each other. For a moment, I debated whether to respond. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitation creeping in. Against my better judgment, I replied. The conversation picked up from there, slowly but steadily. Nothing deep, nothing personal, just small talk that existed in the space between nostalgia and polite detachment. Over the next few weeks, messages would come in randomly. She would mention things that reminded her of me, little moments from the past resurfacing in brief texts. And despite everything, I couldn't deny it. The feelings hadn't just disappeared. Love doesn't vanish overnight. But love alone was never enough. The trust had been broken long ago, and that was something time couldn't undo. Eventually, she suggested meeting up. Just dinner. Just to talk. For a brief moment, the idea tempted me. The thought of sitting across from her again, of revisiting something familiar, lingered in my mind longer than I wanted to admit. But some things are better left behind. But then I paused and asked myself a question I had been avoiding all along. What was the point? What was I really looking for? An apology? Some kind of explanation? A chance to repair something that had been shattered beyond fixing? No. Deep down, I already knew the truth. I didn't need her to give me closure. I needed to find it for myself. So I turned down the offer, not with anger, not with resentment. Just a simple, firm decision. It wasn't a good idea, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. For a long time, I hadn't wanted to admit it, but Lucy had done more damage to me than I ever realized. Not just because she left, but because of the way she made me feel before she did, like I wasn't enough. Like I was disposable. At first, I convinced myself I was fine. I threw myself into work, trained harder at the gym, surrounded myself with friends. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, there was a weight inside me that wouldn't go away. I knew if I didn't deal with it, it would bleed into every part of my life. So I did something I never thought I would do. I went to therapy. At first, it felt strange, sitting there, unpacking everything I had spent years burying, saying out loud the things I had convinced myself didn't matter. But week after week, I started seeing things more clearly. Loving Lucy hadn't made me weak. Fighting for my marriage hadn't made me foolish. I was simply a man who gave his heart to the wrong person. And that wasn't a failure, it was a lesson. Healing didn't happen overnight. It wasn't about waking up one morning and suddenly feeling free. It was in the small moments, the quiet victories, the way I finally stopped looking for her name on my phone, the way my mind no longer wandered back to what-ifs, the way I started feeling like myself again. So I burned every bridge that still connected me to her. No more texts, no more casual check-ins, no more spaces left open for a past that no longer had a place in my life. That chapter was over. Before I deleted her number for good, I sent one final message. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Just the truth. I wished her well. Looking back, I used to believe the only way to move on from someone who hurt you was to prove them wrong, to show them they had lost something valuable, to make them regret it. But along the way, I realized something else. Revenge is a waste of energy. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply moving forward, becoming the best version of yourself, and letting them watch from a distance, if they even bother to look. And that's exactly what I did. That's it for today's story. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like this? How did you handle it? If you enjoyed this, Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life stories. Until next time, take care.